My name is Clara, and I am 42 years old. When I stood in that courtroom, a bitter, biting November wind was howling outside. Inside the old Virginia courthouse, my footsteps fell completely silent against the oak floors. The atmosphere in that room was like a frozen pond. Nothing moved, nobody made a sound. And right in front of me, sitting high up in his heavy wooden chair, a judge was ordering me to take off the very medal my country had pinned on my chest. The Navy Cross, a medal I had earned by putting my life on the line, pulling my comrades out of a burning helicopter to bring them home alive. Judge Thomas believed that wearing it was just some cheap, calculated trick to milk sympathy from the jury. He looked down at me over his gold-rimmed glasses, and with his heavy, authoritative voice, he said, "Mrs. Clara, you cannot use your rank and military honors to your advantage in this courtroom. Take it off, right now." I could have argued right then and there. I could have raised my voice, or called the media in and made a massive scene, but I didn't do any of that. I didn't cause any drama. I stood perfectly straight in my place. Very slowly, I reached up, touched that heavy, cold metal on my chest, unclasped the pin, and placed it down on that hard, cold wooden table. But I knew, my mind had already done the exact math, that the price of this single moment would cost that greedy judge and my sister-in-law Ashley their entire life's earnings, their family name, and every ounce of their fake prestige. Welcome back to Bookbite Studio, the place where quiet women keep their own receipts and where endings aren't handed out as charity, but are earned through sheer grit and patience. If you love stories about family, betrayal, and people crossing the line, you are exactly where you need to be. Let me know in the comments where in the world you are listening from, and please, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Now, let me back all the way up so you can understand exactly how a military veteran ended up standing at that courtroom's defendant table. I spent 15 long, grueling years in the United States Navy. Down at that base in Virginia, I learned a vital lesson. When the enemy is staring you down and bullets are flying from every direction, it is not the time to panic. It is the time to control your breathing. I have seen the kind of terrifying combat that normal people only watch in movies or on TV. I have pulled my brothers in arms from the jaws of death amidst raging ocean waves. And for that very service, I was awarded America's highest military honor, the Navy Cross. When I retired from the Navy, I honestly thought my days of fighting wars were over. I started a new, ordinary life with my husband, Mark, in a very quiet, picturesque town. Mark was an incredibly grounded, calm, and down-to-earth man. His family, on the other hand, was one of the wealthiest, most elite, and connected families in our entire city. His bloodline owned their own country club, a massive ancestral mansion right in the center of town, and their family name was plastered in gold letters across every major event in the county. But Mark was completely different from all of them. He couldn't care less about those lavish parties or the constant showing off. He loved his quiet morning coffee, planting flowers in the garden of our small house, and taking miles-long walks with me. Our life was moving along so peacefully in a small yet beautiful home, right across from a massive oak tree. But then, life played its most cruel, horrific joke on me. Mark was diagnosed with a very rare terminal illness. The man who used to run for miles beside me was slowly confined to a bed. And before I knew it, in just 6 short months, he left me entirely alone in this world, gone forever. I was completely shattered on the inside. I felt like I had just lost the biggest, most important war of my life. But I had no idea that after Mark's passing, my real battle, one fought not with guns or weapons, but with paperwork, deceit, and sheer greed, was just about to begin. Mark had an older sister named Ashley. Ashley was the kind of person who firmly believed that if you didn't wear designer labels, if you didn't speak with their specific elite accent, and if you didn't have millions of dollars sitting in your bank account, you were absolute dirt. She had always treated me like an outsider, a complete stranger, and an ugly stain on her wealthy family's pristine reputation. Whenever she looked at me, there was this strange, visceral disgust and hatred in her eyes. Just 30 days after Mark passed away, when my tears hadn't even fully dried, and I was still burying my face in Mark's old clothes just to smell him, Ashley started circling my little house like a starving vulture. She absolutely could not stomach the idea of me living in that house, or being a part of their family legacy in any way. One rainy Tuesday morning, while I was sitting on my porch drinking coffee, a process server walked up and handed me a heavy 60-page legal envelope. When I opened it and read the very first line, the ground practically fell out from under my feet. Ashley had slapped me with a massive lawsuit. Her claim in court was that I had taken advantage of Mark's deteriorating mental state, and that I had fraudulently altered his will so I could steal their family's money and estate. It was a vile, baseless, absolute lie. Because the truth was, in his will, Mark had only left me that little house we had decorated together, along with a modest amount of his personal savings. The rest of the family fortune and the ancestral lands had already been signed over to Ashley and their family trust long ago. But Ashley was so greedy. She wanted my little house too. She didn't just want me out of the house. She wanted me run out of town and thrown onto the streets. To destroy me, she built an entire army of the city's most expensive, ruthless lawyers. And the worst part of it all was the judge assigned to our case. Judge Thomas was one of Ashley's wealthy father's oldest, closest friends. Suddenly, I was being bombarded with massive court notices. I was getting threats that my bank accounts would be frozen. They were making legal moves to evict me from my own home. If any ordinary woman were in my shoes, the sheer trauma and the weight of their power might have forced her to fall to her knees, give up, or just settle and run out of town. But Ashley, in all her arrogance, forgot one crucial detail. She was picking a fight with a woman who had faced down raging ocean storms and enemy sniper fire in the dead of night. And a soldier never goes down without a fight. We don't cry. We just build a strategy. From that day forward, I stopped shedding tears. I quietly started keeping a meticulous, bulletproof record of every single notice, every piece of paper, every tiny email, every bank statement, and every threat. I went across town to a small, run-down office building and hired a lawyer named David. David wasn't one of those expensive downtown lawyers who sit in giant glass towers. He was a very quiet, soft-spoken man, but he had a razor-sharp, lethal mind. He wasn't the type to yell or put on a theatrical show in the courtroom. He was the type of lawyer who could sift through thousands of pages and find the enemy's one fatal flaw. In our very first meeting, I slammed all of Ashley's files onto David's desk and looked him dead in the eye. "David," I said, "I am not here just to play defense. I'm not just here to save my house. I want to know exactly how this legal game is rigged. I want every single connection between Ashley and Judge Thomas that exists on paper, no matter how deep they've buried it." The court hearings began. Every single date was like stepping into a psychological torture chamber for me. Ashley always sat right in the front row, draped in her expensive designer suits, a string of real pearls around her neck, and diamond rings flashing on her fingers. She would look at me like I was dirt scraped off the bottom of her shoe. And Judge Thomas? He favored her side at every single turn. Whenever my lawyer, David, tried to present solid evidence in my defense, Judge Thomas would cut him off mid-sentence, hiding behind some obscure legal loophole or technicality. He would glare at me over his glasses like I hadn't just forged a will, but committed some horrific, unforgivable crime. They were trying their absolute hardest to break me mentally and humiliate me publicly, But through it all, I sat there like a stone, completely calm. In the Navy, I learned a very important rule. When your enemy is blinded by their own ego and power, and they are making a mistake, you never interrupt them. Ashley thought she was slowly crushing me day by day, but in reality, she was giving me all the time in the world to cut her at the roots and gather the evidence I needed to destroy her. During those long, exhausting months of hearings, David and I didn't surrender a single inch. We started digging deep into the financial histories of Ashley's companies, her family trust, and Judge Thomas's transactions over the last 10 years. I called in a few favors from my old Navy buddies who now worked in high-level finance and government intelligence. We lost sleep. We spent nights chugging coffee, sifting through thousands of documents and tax returns. And then, one night at around 2 a.m., we finally pulled the tiny thread we had been searching for all those months. We discovered that for the past several years, Judge Thomas had been quietly receiving massive payouts from an anonymous, fake shell company owned by Ashley's family, called Blue Ridge Holdings. This wasn't some small-time favor or campaign donation. This was a massive, highly organized bribery syndicate. We had the ironclad records of the monthly money funneled through that shell company directly into the judge's offshore accounts. Every date, every check number, every wire transfer. It was all securely locked inside a thick green folder, resting right in the palm of my hand. Ashley thought she was using her wealth to strip away my entire life, my dignity, and my home. But in truth, she had just dug a very deep grave for herself and that corrupt judge. And then, the day I had been eagerly waiting for finally arrived. It was the final, most crucial hearing of the trial. Instead of my normal, everyday clothes, I opened my closet and put on my full, decorated Navy dress uniform. I polished my brass buttons. My uniform bore all the ribbons of my 15-year service, and pinned proudly to my left chest was the Navy Cross, shining under the lights. When I pushed open the heavy wooden doors of that courtroom and stepped inside, the sound of my boots made the entire room fall dead silent. Ashley looked at me, and the raw hatred and jealousy in her eyes was glaringly obvious. Judge Thomas, sitting high up in his black robes, shot me a vicious glare. And that's when he issued the order I told you about at the beginning of this story. Leaning forward in his chair, he spat. "Mrs. Clara, I find your military attire highly inappropriate for this courtroom. You cannot wear that medal in here. This is a vulgar, manipulative attempt to sway the emotions of this court and the jury. Take it off, right now." The breath hitched in the throats of everyone in the room. Everyone was watching me, waiting to see what I would do. Would I scream about my honor? Would I argue with the judge? David was about to jump up from his seat, but I put my hand out and signaled him to stay quiet. I looked the judge dead in the eyes. I didn't argue. I didn't let a single ounce of anger show on my face. Like a true soldier, I stood at attention, perfectly straight. Very slowly and with the utmost respect, I unpinned my Navy Cross, closed the clasp, and set it down on the wooden table. At that moment, I glanced over at Ashley. The filthy, triumphant smirk on her face was clear as day. She truly believed she had completely crushed my honor, erased my identity, and won the lawsuit. But that foolish woman had no idea that I hadn't just taken off a medal. I had just pushed the button that would detonate her entire life. As soon as the medal hit the table and I took a step back, David stood up with absolute poise. He buttoned his suit jacket and, in a calm voice that echoed off the walls of the courtroom, said, "Your Honor, since my client has just removed her nation's highest honor by order of your court, I would like this court to drop its veil of justice as well." David pulled that thick green folder from his briefcase and slid several pages toward the jury box and the judge's bench. It was the complete, undeniable ledger of the secret bank accounts, showing the money flowing directly from Ashley's fake company, Blue Ridge Holdings, straight into Judge Thomas's secret accounts. David didn't raise his voice a single decibel, but every word he spoke dropped like a bomb in that silent courtroom. Looking straight into the judge's eyes, he asked, "Your Honor, would you care to explain to this jury, and to the people in this gallery, exactly why $75,000 was wired to you from Ashley's shell company on the 25th of last month? And why this continuous stream of bribery has been happening every single month for the past 4 years?" That was the heaviest, longest moment of my entire life, and of that courtroom's history. Judge Thomas's face turned completely ashen, as white as a sheet of paper. His hands started visibly shaking, and he couldn't form a single word of defense. Ashley, who had been celebrating her victory just seconds ago, jerked out of her seat. All her arrogance, all her old money pride, and that expensive designer suit, it was all stripped away in a flash, exposing exactly what she was. She screamed at the top of her lungs, "This is a lie! It's a setup!" But paper trails don't lie. The journalists sitting in the back rows, the ones who had looked like they were bought and paid for by Ashley's money, immediately whipped out their phones and cameras. The public humiliation of a Navy Cross recipient, paired with the massive corruption of a sitting judge, that news spread like wildfire across the entire United States within an hour. The military community, which will fight tooth and nail for the honor of its veterans, heard how a martyr's wife and a hero had been degraded in open court. The country erupted in outrage. Ashley's bogus lawsuit was thrown out that very day, right then and there. But my story didn't end there. The real reckoning had just begun. Within a matter of days, Judge Thomas was stripped of his gavel forever. He was dragged into a massive federal trial for corruption and selling justice. His entire career, his reputation, and his pension were entirely wiped out, turned to dust. As for Ashley, she was hit with multiple criminal charges for fraud, document forgery, and bribing a federal judge. All her influence, all her millions, and her snobby, arrogant family couldn't save her from the police handcuffs and a prison cell. The woman who wanted to throw me out on the street to freeze was now sitting behind iron bars, crying over her own ruined fate. And me? I walked back into that quiet, beautiful little house, the one my Mark had chosen for me with so much love, with my head held high. I picked up my Navy Cross from that cold table, and I pinned it right back over my heart. Because that day, I learned a profound, universal truth. True honor and real strength can never be bought with a fat bank account, designer clothes, or the order of a corrupt court. It lives inside you. It is earned through your truth, your patience, and your actions. And those who try to steal it using deceit and money will always end up paying a price so heavy they won't be able to settle the debt for the rest of their lives. I hope my story serves as a reminder that no matter how difficult the path of truth gets, if you stay calm and wait for the right moment, victory will always be yours. If you connected with my story and you want to hear more deep, emotional stories of human struggle, resilience, and hard-fought truth, please hit the like button for Bookbite Studio. Share this video with your friends and family, and make sure you subscribe to our channel. Your love and support are our true strength, and it inspires us to bring even more powerful stories right to your screen. Let me know in the comments down below, what would you have done if you were in my shoes in that courtroom? I'll see you in the next powerful, true story. Until then, take care of yourself and your loved ones, and always stand tall with the truth. Thank you.